Andrew, just a week or two ago, we read in the press some comments from yourself talking about international contribution, non-Welsh qualified limit. Caused a bit of a reaction and some good articles in the media. But perhaps you'd like to, for the sake of our viewers, you'd like to expand a little bit on the points that you're trying to make.
Yeah, I think the key thing we were trying to say is you want to reward what you value, and at the moment, globally, there are clubs, regions, provinces who are contributing the most, and often they're the ones that are suffering the most because they're supporting the international game. And so we feel that if we look at things statistically, you look at squads in England, for example, who have near on 35% of their squads are foreign. Squads in France, which are near on 40% plus on average. There's a real disconnect in the competitions that we're playing in, and also it connects to the wider issues in around global season structure, because rugby is not grasping the issues, and as a consequence, the clubs that are contributing the most and want to be actively involved with their national unions are actually the ones being penalised. So in our view, both if we want to compete domestically, then there needs to be a rapid rethink of clubs such as ours, and traditionally the Blues have contributed large numbers to the national cause, to enable them to be able to bring in people during those fallow periods when our internationals are away. We still want to develop players, but it's very hard to develop young players when they're surrounded by young players. So we want to ensure that we have a spine of senior talent that are often of a very high quality, who can be sprinkled amongst these young players that we hopefully will go on and play for Wales and enable us to compete so we can make the top six, so we can stay in Europe. And when we are in Europe, then we have greater strength and depth to enable us to compete at that level as well. In the meantime, we feel that the national bodies need to get together and start looking at this global season urgently, otherwise they're very much going to kill the very entities that feed them the players, coaches, and they need to thrive and develop.
I think it's something that we've talked about internally previously when you're looking at how you judge the success of the regions. Some people look at the regions as purely just a tool to develop players for the national squad, something the Ospreys have historically done very well, continue to do very well, but other people will then perhaps bash the regions for underachieving in competitions. Again, the Ospreys have led the way in terms of winning silverware, so we're at the top of the chain, but it becomes increasingly difficult to combine both unless something changes, perhaps.
Yeah, there's a massive tipping point at the moment, I think, whereby the competitions that we're currently in aren't generating the same revenue as others, and so that accentuates the tipping point when there's a financial issue to resolve as well. Now, we don't want the same money as French and English, because there's more factors that go to make success than just cash. But on top of that, there is such a significant difference now. And so what we are asking for is for there to be some kind of reflection on this in the way that everyone's taken on an individual basis. It made me laugh actually when I picked up the newspaper and seeing that people compared that we should be like Connaught. Well, let's be like Connaught, shall we? 30% of your squad are foreign, and a significant amount of resource, time and energy is going into that province to enhance and develop them for Irish rugby. On top of that, though, they contribute the least to the Irish national cause. So if the papers want us to be like Connaught, then I don't think that's going to be particularly satisfactory when it comes to the Welsh national cause moving forward. There needs to be a balance reached. What was interesting was over Christmas period was seeing Big Bash cricket attract crowds of 80,000 plus at club level. And so I would say to the international game, particularly World Rugby, who seem to be, I'll be quite frank, putting their head in the sand on many of the issues, is at the moment you've probably got England and France who are taking off from the club level. You've got sports like cricket, for example, who are now, you're seeing with Big Bash cricket, for example, changing their club game and making it appealing, and it's week in, week out, it's regular. And I think the international cricket game is going to suffer because of it. So we've got to really have a think to make sure that we keep international rugby as the pinnacle, and we don't destroy our grassroots from the tip, which is regional rugby, right through to the roots, which is obviously junior club rugby.
In terms of finding that balancing act between development, being competitive, players going to international rugby, no one's qualified, it's always going to be an emotive subject, something you clearly put a bit of thought into. How do you envisage it acting in terms of the Ospreys? What would the balancing act be that you would see?
Well, when I talked to Steve Hansen when he was over for the World Cup, and I asked him, what is it that international rugby would want? And he was very clear on the number of weeks he felt that an international window should apply for. And so it's easily workable. I also think the club game needs to have a look at itself, and that are we overexposing our brands? So between the two, I think there needs to be some form of cutback, but then a replacement of where those particular competitions are played. You don't have the same issues in the Southern Hemisphere because they've thought out their international windows. There is a little bit of overlap at the moment. But I think the Celtic nations in particular, and the Italians, are more closely aligned to the Southern Hemisphere partners, whereas traditionally we've leaned towards the English in particular. And maybe it's time that we formed an alliance with them that's far stronger, that looks at a calendar which works for the good of the game, not necessarily the good of any one broadcaster in the first instance. And then from there, we can develop something that, well, if you look at it, Rugby League have developed. Again, another game that actually has a good balance between its international game, where it's seeing growth, and a really strong club team. Who would have ever thought they'd have a really strong club side in Perpignan? You know, so who would have thought that they would have sold the most tickets for rugby league matches recently were coming from the southeast for their test match against New Zealand. So there's growth there, isn't there? And that's because they've been grappled with these issues and taken control of them. So you're seeing sports starting to get an understanding and trying to find a balance. Are we going to be like cricket? Or are we going to be more like rugby league? Where's our balance going to be met?